And we're live. Hello, all. We go hard around here. Welcome back to the Fast Furious Fall Features. My name is always Mr. Harlan Guthrie. I'm here with my lovely wife, Mrs. Joe Guthrie. How are you tonight, Joe?
I'm doing super well. How are you, Harlan?
I'm doing great, and we have two guests that we're excited to introduce to you, the audience, as well as, frankly, ourselves, to get to know these wonderful people a little bit more. If you're wondering what all of this is, welcome. All fall long, we have been doing these little interviews, pulling back the curtain, as it were, on the people who work behind the scenes on many of the products that you enjoy. Many of the little stories that you might have told around your table have first been told by these people, as well as the people who make everything kind of run over here. So welcome, have a seat, grab a drink, grab another drink. What day is it?
Keep them coming.
It's a drinking day. Let's just be real. And we're getting close to Halloween, so we're definitely getting into the spooky vibe. If you notice with the music, a little bit of the Halloween ripoff track there. I don't think that was legit Halloween. I think it was a ripoff track, but that's okay. That's how we got to keep it safe around here. Please, for the audience at home, Teller and John, one at a time. Teller, starting with you. Tell us who you are and who you are in terms of Pinnacle Entertainment.
Well, thanks, and good evening, everybody. I'm one of the writers at Pinnacle. I've been involved with the company since its early inception, way back with original Deadlands, then original Hell on Earth, then through the Weird Wars sagas, starting with Vietnam, Weird Wars Rome, Weird War One. I've written into Weird War Two also. That's about all I can say about myself.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
I'm wearing a hat in honor of John's Lost Colony. I just got back from Banshee, so I was hanging out with some of the United Nations Colonial Marines there.
Awesome. We're excited to have you tonight. And I know lots of people have played a lot of that, so I know we're going to have questions for you from ourselves and from the audience. So again, if you're watching and you have questions for either of these people, throw them into the comments. You can comment along on Facebook, Twitch, whatever other platforms they got out there, new ones I'm sure. You can comment along like these wonderful people. Hi. And John, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you fit into this little home we like to call Pinnacle.
I'm hoping to eventually write some stuff for Pinnacle. Right now, no. I've been working on Deadlands since 1996 or 7, along with Shane and everybody else in the crew. Quite a few of those orange books out there still have my name on them. And I've written in every one of the Deadlands settings. I think Shane's the only other guy that's done that, from Deadlands through Lost Colony and everything in between. And I've been working on Deadlands and Dark Ages, but probably most everybody knows me from the Night Train adventure for original Deadlands.
Amazing. Well, we're excited to have you on the show as well. Welcome, both of you. So, Teller, you mentioned Weird Wars. Now, obviously, this is a huge kind of name when you are in this world. But for those who may not, for those who stumbled across this video and are thankfully maybe just learning about what this is, can you tell us a little bit about what Weird Wars is to the layman?
Sure. So in the Weird Wars books, we explore the strangeness that has gone on throughout conflicts, throughout history. Basically, when all of the energies are released in a war, the veil between realities starts to crumble. Things that might have been in places that were avoided by locals who were much smarter than invading armies are stumbled upon and unleashed. In some cases, some of the sides will enlist some of these weird mythical or legendary creatures to aid them in their wars. So we've been able to explore from ancient times all the way up into I wrote an adventure and ran it a couple years ago at ChupacabraCon that was set in modern day Afghanistan. So we've got the whole gamut of things, because wherever there's conflict, there's weirdness.
It's true. And it's interesting because, the idea of this Weird Wars, this parallel between a real life conflict and then having sort of a supernatural element or an undercurrent or a B plot, as it were. It's very common with a lot of different things, but putting it in an RPG setting is very fresh when it obviously first happened. What do you think about those two settings tend to have such a great connection between sort of this visceral real world, but then also this great underlying of supernatural? Because we've seen it, in the dime novel pages, in even movies nowadays. I think there was one a few years ago, Overlord or something like that, which did a kind of a zombie kind of take too. What about those two settings seems to, in the Venn diagram, mesh so well?
Well, for me, the thing that I love to write about is sometimes, as a military historian myself, sometimes you read about things and you go, why in the heck would that have ever happened? Right? I mean, who in their right mind would have decided to do that, or why would someone even think about that? Or, you hear crazy tales in real life from things that happened in a battlefield. I mean, the thing that encouraged me to write my Weird War Afghanistan story was a story that appeared in, I believe, the New York Times, probably around 2005 or 2006, right, about this haunted outpost in Afghanistan that some U.S. soldiers were occupying. And the way my feverish mind works, I thought about that, and obviously, as part of the government conspiracy, the New York Times is just going to laugh it off, right? So, but I did the deeper dive and thought about, what are they really trying to hide there? So I think that the real pull for Weird Wars and the real draw for people is, you can play it straight if you want, right? I mean, you can have a squad of soldiers that's fighting the Nazis. You can have a squad of soldiers that are, trying to drive the Carthaginians from Italy, or you can add all those things that happen to it. And I think that's what really draws people into it, is because real war is horrible enough and it's terrifying enough. But when you add the other things into it, then I think it really ratchets it up a good bit. And I think that's the kind of horror, by adding those creatures in and those situations that we can all kind of relate to because we've watched those horror movies. I mean, thankfully, most of us haven't been to war and experienced the real terror of war, but I think that makes it a little more relatable by adding in that supernatural component that we've all kind of mostly grown up with.
Do you find that the experience as a player, that I don't know, the intermeshing of real kind of the legit conflict of war, the experience, and meshing that in with kind of a supernatural component, do you find that that's what players come to the table for, or they're more so interested in wargaming and then they're excited to sort of discover that there's like a secondary underbelly?
So I think it can go both ways. Most of the convention games that I run start out fairly normal. And then you try to work it in there, because I think if you start off with, oh my gosh, a werewolf jumps out of the hedgerow at you and starts attacking you, I think it really dilutes it, and then it kind of sets you up for this wild ride, and it becomes more of like a D&D game with M1 rifles and steel helmets, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. Yeah, the whole, it's kind of about the transition between the two. Starting in one foot or the other too firmly, it's not really the experience. That's very interesting to think about Weird Wars kind of at its core being about the transition, because that's really, it has to descend, Right. Or ascend, I guess.
So think about the movie Platoon, right? So Charlie Sheen's character arrives in country, they're getting off the plane, they see body bags going on. That's kind of scary, right? Because these poor guys, they've just finished basic training and advanced training, and here they are in country. And so you're going along, and they go on their first patrol, and they set up that ambush, and you see in the darkness, the mosquitoes are buzzing around, and you see that like Buddha statue in the darkness and the mist and things, and then these wraith-like figures come out. I mean, that could have easily gone into a Weird War thing, because they start shooting them and they realize, wow, they're not falling down because the fog has made it so that you can't see these are actually undead Vietnamese soldiers coming at you.
Yeah.
Right? So
Spoilers, by the way.
Yeah, right. I've just ruined Gen Con's adventure for next year. So I think that obviously people are, unless you've got a really evil or sadistic game master like John Goff here, you're going into it knowing that it's going to be a weird war game. It's just like, when is it going to happen?
Sure.
Right? At what point? And I think that's kind of, because horror games are hard to run at the table, right? Especially everybody's sitting around.
Especially convention, yeah.
Beer. Yeah, I mean,
setting the tone is very difficult.
Yeah.
Right. But it's waiting for that to happen, because I think the anticipation, the buildup of the anticipation, and you're waiting, and it's like, when is something going to happen, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So I think that, especially in my, I ran one at Gen Con years ago that I think really caught the folks off guard, because you were picking up there was tangential weirdness going on, but nothing that was too in your face until you got to the very end, and then you realize, wow, I should have picked that up all along. And I think that was really fun for the players.
Well, sorry, go ahead, John.
As a writer that is so prolific within this concept, this setting, I imagine that coming up with the war and the weirdness is almost like being a sommelier, right? You're pairing a wine with a cheese. Do you have a favorite combination of conflict and paranormal?
Or maybe a favorite one that you were like, oh, that's like a good, like, you mentioned.
What I mean.
Yeah, like
a chupacabra and, or
yeah.
UFOs
and the Alamo.
And
well, it really depends, because I try and do a deep dive, like, one of the Weird Wars adventures I wrote, the Weird War 1 adventure that I wrote, that was kind of the culminating thing. You're reading and you're reading and you're reading about things, and to find out that, like, right toward the end, there was a star that had gone nova, and it had gotten really bright, and then it had died off. Well, okay, that could just be a astronomical phenomenon, or it could be the gate started to open and the good guys ruined the ritual and it closed, right? Or, you look at some place names in areas and you're like, okay, there's got to be something going on in that place, because why would something be called, the Hellmouth or something, right? I mean, like my Afghanistan adventure that I wrote, I was reading about Alexander's conquest through Afghanistan as he was heading on to India, and I started reading about this black gate that was there that supposedly he had been involved with. That, and okay, so number one, Black Gate, that sounds cool, right? I mean, something's got to be going on there. And then you look at some of the mythology and the legends that were around this, and it's like, oh man, this stuff just writes itself. So I don't know that I have a favorite pairing, just because each of these conflicts, because we're dealing with different cultures, ancient Rome, early 1900s, all the weirdness that went on in World War II, right, across the globe. I think that each one brings its own flavor of monster. Now, sure, you can have lycanthropes from ancient times all the way up into modern stuff. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the Love, Death, and Robots season 1 episode of the werewolf in the American fire base where the Marines are using, I don't, spoilers, but I mean, that was really, I about fell off my couch when I saw that, because I was like, oh my God, hopefully those folks have read some of the Weird Wars stuff and were inspired by that. So,
or if not, then people who watched it are now getting turned on to it, and they're kind of like getting into it. That's exciting, and I'm excited to talk more about this, Teller. But John, you've been sitting there very patiently, very kind. So obviously you have a rich history of writing with Pinnacle and all that kind of stuff. But you did mention at the tail end there that people are rich fucking. That people are already kind of beating down the door for Deadlands, Dark Ages. You talked about it again now. We're ignorant. Dark Ages, we already kind of know, but let's talk us a little bit about what Deadlands Dark Ages is.
It's something that players have been clamoring for since almost the inception of Dark Ages, which Deadlands. You said have one or more drinks. That's on you. Since Deadlands came out, which was a European-centric one that also has a medieval type of setting. So what we've talked about it literally for decades, setting one in the Dark Ages or the medieval period, and we went back and forth on what time period we were going to set it in, and we eventually settled on what historians generally accept to be the true Dark Ages, which would be prior to the 11th or 12th century. And anyone that's followed Deadlands is familiar with the plot or the subplot involving the Cackler. In fact, we did a whole comic book series on it, I believe, or oversized comic. Sorry, identifying who the Cackler was, and I don't want to spill that. If you haven't read it yet, go out and buy it. Spend your money.
Spend your money. You heard it here, folks. Go spend your money. Get a Halloween gift for everyone you know.
But that time frame in Britain has always been kind of in the background of Deadlands. We allude to things happening before the 1300s and so forth in the original books. But finally, we said, all right, now's the time to come out with something in that time frame. And we settled on the 9th century in Saxon Britain. And things that happen as a result of the Cackler and the comic books, etc., influence, oddly, things that happened back in this time period. And that's what Dark Ages now explores, is the change in history, because Deadlands is always, the Weird West has always kind of represented a change in our history. Something happened and things went off the rails, and this is how that time frame
This is kind of the inciting event, more or less, that sort of created all that.
An alternative past that then leads into an alternative future. This now takes that alternative past and bounces it into an alternative past. And it's resulted in some changes in the existing Weird West timeline and everything that comes after it, and we refer to it as the Morgana effect. And you can run with that as far as you want, if you're listening. So it's fascinating. I mean, and Deadlands really sort of applies vaguely to a specific place, a lot of maps, Sure.
I mean, more or less, you know what I mean? Are you carrying that over in the same way with this Dark Ages? Is there still going to be that sort of familiarity in this area, where people can kind of be like, oh, this is a new area to explore? Is there going to be new you know what I mean? How there's kind of that walking the line between fictional and real.
I think I understand what you're asking.
Yeah,
I am pretty dense, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're doing is, it is an alternative past. Much like the original Weird West was. You could take the Weird West map, put it up, and put up an Old West map and compare the two, and you would see almost identical similarities. There would be some changes, but not anything to blow your socks off. I think the advantage we have in Dark Ages is that it's the Dark Ages. Finding information on that is really hard. Having worked on it for years, I could swear to that on the witness stand.
Well, that's exactly kind of my point. There's so much more there you could kind of make up. There's so much. It's such a bigger canvas that you get to paint on, because it's so much more vague. You're less kind of structured to like, well, Utah has to be here. Like, that's just where it is, and it's this many miles from this place. Whereas at this point, when these areas are sort of more nebulous, and even though the landmass doesn't change, the distance can kind of be stretched a little bit.
True, we have limited it to, like I said, Saxon Britain. So you're talking about something that's roughly the size of 3 states. And we do a lot of the places that were there then, because I don't know how many fans we have in the UK, because it's Britain, a lot of the same places are still there.
Well, none are awake right now, put it that way.
When they come on and watch it later, I'm behind the line. But let's just say things that get built there tend to stay. So the cities that are there now are almost entirely based on settlements that were there in the 900s, which kind of blows my mind.
It's crazy.
One of the oldest cities we have in the United States is a little over 350 years old, and you're talking almost 3 times that back there. And these places existed back during the time of Teller's Weird Wars Rome. Most are built on former Roman settlements.
I thought you were going to make a dig about how old Teller is.
I got no room.
John's older than me. So.
Now, John, you did mention briefly about how you've been working on this project for a number of years, and you mentioned some of the research that has gone into it. Can you speak a little bit to the process that you've gone through in order to make this feel like a historically real setting?
Like Teller, I am a historian. I actually have a thing up on the wall above me there that says I can call myself that. Actually, myself, Teller, and Shane all have degrees or higher level studies in that field, which might be one reason why we've gravitated so strongly to it.
Sure.
But the Dark Ages was tough. I have a ton of books, both electronic and old tree killing style, but I've also done a tremendous amount of research online. I spend way too much time reading articles on archaeological excavations, things that people have found, because there's no real written record of this time outside of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which is very vague. But I wanted to get as close to the, I guess, objective truth of what was there at the time the changes began as I could. But there were several times where I had to decide between, is this researcher's position great, or is this researcher's position the right one? Which one do I go for? And in most cases, presented with those options, I just pick the one that made the best story. And
I mean, at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. You know what I mean? You have to walk one lane, but you also have to go, okay, but in the end, this is about storytelling, the option for storytelling, and the stories that people are going to get to tell in their own time.
Sure.
Right.
That's really fascinating and exciting, and I want to talk more about it. We do have a question from somebody that was posted last night that I want to ask you before we get too far down this path, because I'm interested in diving down. It was a compliment question, so I don't feel like I should be too complimentary, but I'll read it anyway because they wrote it. No. Thank you for many wonderful supplements you've created, Mr. Goff. I've collected dozens of cool adventures from them, so thank you. Very nice. Whatever. Get out of here now.
Thank you for reading them and purchasing them.
Well, and then here's their question. Do you have plans or ideas for Deadlands Noir, changed by the Morgana effect? And then my personal wish is a Kickstarter for a brand of new suede Deadlands Noir book with the wonderful layout by Carl. Well, this is now just a pitch for...
It's a sandwich. There's a compliment.
There's
and
a compliment, a question, and then a demand.
And then a compliment, a demand couched in a compliment.
Yeah, a demand couched in a compliment, as all things should be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully the powers that be will see that, sir, and take your wishes into consideration. I can say that there are plans for a post-Morgana effect Deadlands Noir. I'm not entirely sure what that will entail, but that book has been sold out for a tremendous amount of time. I'm probably stretching it, but...
17 years this thing's been sold out for. At least. And times that by 10. It's got 170 years.
It's published. No, it's been sold out for at least a year or two, and the choice was made not to reprint it because we wanted to update it to the new the way that the setting has changed. Obviously, if you're familiar with the Deadlands Weird West and with the update, you know that the Confederacy fell in post Morgana effect. And that obviously is going to have some effects on a city that sits in what is now the former Confederacy. So
it's going to have a big knock-on effect.
Right.
All interesting stuff. Fantastic. Teller, so heading back your way a little bit, you also worked on... there's more compliments for people who aren't even here, John Doom. Gosh, Carl's great. Yeah, we all love Carl. Carl, if you're watching, we love you. You're not watching, so let's make fun of him. Anyway, back to you, Teller. We're talking about... You also worked on Deadlands, Hell on Earth, which I think is a lot of people's maybe choice, favorite for many reasons. I think, obviously, your influence from some of the other things you worked on has tainted it. Again... Tell us a little bit about that for those unaware. A little bit of a pitch. You could just pitch all the cool shit you like here, by the way. This is just, you get to, hey, you want to hear something else? Go buy this now. So what is Deadlands Hell on Earth?
So Deadlands Hell on Earth originally was what happens in the Deadlands universe in the late 2000s, when the Union and the Confederacy finally have enough of each other, and a nuclear war happens, and a nuclear war fought with ghost rock bombs, irradiated ghost rock bombs, which when they explode, open up portals into the Deadlands, and this is what the Mormons 150 years earlier had warned about that was going to come down the pike, and so it's set in a post-apocalyptic hell that is populated not only with road gangs and people desperate for their next meal or drop of water, but also these horrific creatures out of nightmare. In the Deadlands themselves, anything can happen. I mean, the fall of civilization basically has freed up the creatures that used to be in the shadows in Deadlands and Deadlands Noir. So they're kind of running loose and free. But because remember, in the original Deadlands, you didn't want to overdo it, right? Because if everybody knows there's werewolves, then they're not going to be afraid of them, right? So that kind of ruins. You can't build up the fear level if you're a blunt force object about it. But now that the whole world is a Deadland, that all the shackles are off, and inside these Deadlands, which is something that I really liked, just the weirdest, craziest stuff can happen. I remember once in one of my games, they went into the grounds of an old grocery store, and this conglomeration of grocery carts that in the center was the store manager, and he had just this conglomeration of grocery carts that had melded together and had these hooks and claws and stuff.
Terrifying.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I've always been a big fan of the post-apocalyptic setting. I watched the Omega Man with Charlton Heston, I think when I was about 7 years old, and started preparing for the apocalypse at that point in my life. And back in college days when Shane was running a GURPS post-apocalyptic game, there wasn't such a thing, so he made one up.
Shane making stuff up?
Oh,
not him.
That's when I just really, and that's when Shane realized that I'm just a post-apocalyptic fanatic. So, he always told me once Deadland had gotten to be such a commercial success, he's like, I'm going to make up a setting just for you. And he sure did. So, I was the brand manager for quite a while. It's just something that, I don't know, just for some twisted reason speaks to me.
Well, and I think the reason I kind of said it's synonymous and very popular is because to me, at least amongst my friends and the people who I know that play it, it always kind of felt like when you're playing Deadlands for a certain amount of time, and maybe you don't get tired of the setting, but eventually everything goes the way of the dodo, and that's when hell on earth comes in, because you can always just, as a GM, you're okay, we're tired of playing in this sandbox, let's make new characters, we're now at this point, and now everything's kind of very, very different, but we still get to play with the same rule system and stuff like that. It kind of feels like an end game, as it were, of kind of Deadlands in general.
I feel like there's a kind of a sweet spot in post-apocalyptic fiction where enough time has happened since the inciting event that mutations have been able to evolve and factions of gangs have roved together, but not so long enough that the PCs are necessarily going to feel comfortable and like dug in, right? How do you kind of manage that when you introduce the setting to your players?
Yeah, because it still needs to feel, so much of the fun of like a post-apocalyptic setting is like exploring it. When you look at like the Fallout universe, it's always like you come out of your vault. That's why it's cool, because now you get to explore the world. That's a good point.
But also you want PCs that still feel like
part of the
capable
world.
and knowledgeable somehow.
Right. And so, like, for example, in Shane's game, way back when, in his GURPS post-apocalyptic game, it was set like 70 years after the apocalypse, right? So no one remembered what it was like before, except for my guy, because I spent all my character building GURPS points to have like Eternal Hero or like Immortal or something, right? So my backstory was because I had been exposed to a weird combination of nuclear, biological, and chemical things in the environment in the last war. I'd stopped aging, so I was the only person in the whole group that could remember, and because of that, it was more impactful to me when we would find an ancient Coke machine that actually still had a can that was intact, and I remembered coffee and caffeine and things. So I think in Hell on Earth, it's been 13 years now. A lot of people are dead, right? And you might have young characters that don't remember it, but you still have people that remembered what it was like back then. And I think one thing that makes it different from, say, Fallout, or Fallout's probably not a good example.
Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, or maybe Gamma World or something like that.
Yeah,
although again, hundreds of years after the apocalypse, they remember not only what it was like before the bombs fell, but they remember what it was like when all these monsters weren't running around, right? Because there's differences in your traditional post-apocalyptic game where, okay, you might have, if it's kind of a, I hate to use the term, but a wacky one like Gamma World, where you have, you can have a tree character, right, or awakened shrub or something like that.
Whoa! Let's put some hard limits here.
and I love the thing that I'm a huge Judge Dredd fan, and if you look at the mutants in Judge Dredd, you have like a guy with a hand growing out of the top of his head, right? Or you have like a chicken person, right?
Yeah.
And what I love about Ghost Rock Bombs is because it's a soul searing, mutating thing. The real you can come out. So, you can have these totally unscientific, crazy mutations. And so you never know what you're going to run into. I'm trying to think.
It's definitely a no holds bar. Like, you can really kind of let your creative flag fly when you're doing it. Yeah. It's right. And it's justified in the world,
Right. So like Insidious Sin, right, where each casino had its own thing, right? Like you had the one that was overrun by apes, and you had the Venetian that all these aquatic mutants had taken up residence in the canals in the Venetian, right? And you had the Luxor, where all the ones that looked like weird animal-headed Egyptian gods had gravitated toward, right? So I think, and honestly, I don't remember what your initial question was now, but
doesn't matter. We're in a new realm of excitement, just talking about cool shit, which is why we're here.
So I think that's what really excites me about the whole Hell on Earth milieu, is that you can do all that kind of stuff. And if you want somebody who has kind of a Fallout background, then you're part of the Damocles Project. right? And you're
True.
people who were frozen before the war.
Yeah.
Now you come out into this craziness, and you're like, what the heck, right? And you're kind of playing a norm, right? Who's just thrust into this situation, not somebody who saw the bombs fall and has had 13 years to kind of try to get acclimated to the wackiness, but you're just like thrown right into it. And that's kind of why I wrote that into it, because I really wanted, if somebody wanted to have that kind of character who was just, suddenly you wake up and it's not your world anymore.
Then you can have that kind of story to tell from your experience, which is really exciting. You mentioned a few times playing games at conventions, obviously convention home play. Do you have a preference? Do you like sitting down at a table and trying to get people on board with some wacky idea, Weird Wars and all that kind of stuff? Or do you prefer kind of the comfort and the trust of playing with people you've played with many, many times?
So honestly, I don't have a favorite. I'm kind of probably a little OCD, and as far as when I go to a convention, I go there for them to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, because they're paying to be there, right? And I'm a professional, right? So I know John, he just goes in there and he's got an easy job because he tries to kill off everybody as fast as he can. Because that's what he does, even at his home game that I play in. But I really want to give them the best time that I can, versus at home where it's a more long-term kind of thing and we're comfortable with each other. It's more of a long-term storytelling thing versus you're going to get on this roller coaster and you're going to have fun on this roller coaster, and then in 4 hours you're going to get off of it. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, every time we bring people on, we love kind of picking their brains about preferences, about like convention versus home, because there's so many different, conversations and arguments to be made for either, and sometimes it just boils down to personal preference. And because I know the audience is always eager to know, John, yourself too, do you prefer convention slaughtering people? Do you prefer being at home slaughtering people? Where do you like to slaughter people?
Teller likes to play up my reputation. It's not quite as severe as all that.
I feel like there's some bad blood there. There's like
no.
Oh, I just mean that
Teller knows that John's killed enough of Teller's characters.
Don't speak ill of the DM.
Any of that was quelled on one of our many long drives together. But at home, on home tables, I'm not, in spite of what you may have been told, not nearly as brutal as I will sometimes let myself be in convention games, because I know that the people sitting down and put time into their characters. I do like to make things challenging, so there's the feel that there's something at risk here. You're not just going to walk through this. Convention games, it really depends. I run two types of convention games. One is the big fight, where I like to roll out terrain and make a big show of it.
A production.
Yes, exactly. Like last year at the Deadlands convention we had in Deadwood, I took time to have all the terrain for the town in Night Train, and it's the first time I'd ever run Night Train at a convention, and I ran it pretty much straight across from start to finish, 2 sessions. And when the fight came, it's a toss-up. You may live or you may die, and that going in. And those, I can be heavy-handed, but only towards the end, because like Teller said, people are paying to be there. And people have paid effectively to play in this game, so I don't want to, I'm not going to off you in the first 15 minutes of a 4-hour time slot.
Well, and not only that, and it's interesting because we talked about Weird Wars, we talked about horror, and all of that kind of stuff is about, a horror movie only really matters when the person gets killed in the end if you've had enough time to care about the character. And it's no different when you're role playing, you know, like a shot that you miss and then you go down in the last act is so much more meaningful than stepping on a bomb and blowing up in the first 10 minutes, not just for pay, but also because like, well, now I feel like, you know, what was this? I made this character to bullshit. He dies the first 5 seconds. Like I'm not attached to that type of vibe, you know?
And in a convention game, I joke about gaming fame being, you know, with $6 you could buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks if you had an extra $2. I've gone to conventions where I'm a guest and people don't know who I am. But if I'm playing somewhere where people know who I am, you know, the 2 or 3 people on the planet, and they're playing in a game that I'm running, I tend to ratchet it up a little bit because they already have that anticipation going in that
they're expecting it.
Yeah, this is the killer Deadlands GM, and
You want to give them the full John Goff experience.
I mean, you're wearing the shirt, John, so if you wear that, they'll know who you are when you get in there. Just let's get your bowling shirt, Dave.
I've got another one that says Night Train. But
well, speaking of Deadlands GMs and speaking of somebody who's been mentioned a lot tonight, I believe we have Shane on the line. Shane, can you hear us? Are you there? It's me, Margaret. I don't know. Shane, I know, has been dipping in and out. Oh.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you. You sound like a robot. Welcome.
Hey, sorry everybody. I am on the way home from jury duty in Buffalo traffic. I just want to stop in and say hi to the 2 guys who actually taught me the game. These are my mentors who you're talking to. I love these guys. I kind of hate them sometimes too.
We're going to need you to select all the pictures that have a boat in them before we continue.
That's a good joke.
That's a really good joke.
I think I love these guys, but then I also thought I heard hate both of them. So I don't know if it went both.
Said something about transferring all shares in the company.
I heard that too, actually, and us.
It is legally binding.
Legally binding, the robots, because you didn't fill that out. Yeah. No, I think, Shane, I think the sentiment is received well, but you sound like a robot through and through. So I'm going to say thank you for joining. Big round of applause for Shane.
Thanks, Shane.
Because that's going to be awkward trying to piece that together. But yeah, I think you know Shane well, you know.
Is he in trouble?
I thought I heard I need help. Call the police.
Texting him Sarah Connor's address and just.
That's right. I've just seen this boy. I guess that's the other guy who says it. But anyway, thank you, Shane. I think your connection is too brutal to
next time.
To do it. Yeah, next time we would love to have Shane on. But you know, especially with how much you've talked about it, your GURPS games. You know how much he has helped in many different ways.
When did you guys start playing together? Do you remember your first game? And was it the start of a long and beautiful friendship, or did you have to reconnect many years later?
I'll let John go first because he played with him first. So.
Yeah, I was going to say Teller and I, until he started working with Pinnacle, I think that's where we met, because back in college, I had posted a little note card. This was in the days before the internet, you know, like 1998. I don't know. I'm not that old, so I can't remember. But in a game store looking for players, and he showed up with himself, John Hopler, who's also written extensively in the original Deadlands universe, and to play in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign I ran. They were, if I remember correctly, freshmen, and I was. The university had decided that the two of us should take some time apart and see other people for a year. And
fair.
But I was a junior at the time, and so we got to play together in college for 2 years before I graduated. And that, according to him, I will speak for him since he's not here to refute me, was a very formative experience for him as far as tabletop role-playing goes. We had an exceptional group, and all of us remain friends to this day and in contact, and many of us every day almost stay.
That's so cool.
But that's where we met, and we played Dungeons and Dragons at first, and then we moved to GURPS for other types of games, particularly horror games, and we usually played those as one shot.
Mm-hmm.
Because we found that adds to the tension, because it's a one shot, you're not guaranteed to get to the end of it. Then I joined the military, and I think that's where Teller comes in.
So I think I remember. So I think I had met Shane before we started gaming, because we were in the same National Guard unit. I was older than him and higher in rank than him, but he had a roommate. he had a roommate who was big into miniature, wargaming, and so I had gone over to Shane's apartment to play a miniature war game with this guy, and I met Shane in a social setting, and we got to talking. And at that point in time, I had been playing role-playing games for about 14 years, and unfortunately, I had always game mastered or DM'd or whatever the nomenclature for the specific game was. And so when I found out that Shane was trying to put a group together and had some openings, I said, yeah, sure. Now it was GURPS, and I had never played GURPS before, but he dangled the post-apocalyptic thing in front of me, and I said, well, heck yeah, sure. And so we played, let's see, I was in graduate school at that time. I think we probably played for about 3 years maybe, as he was doing things and then starting a local game store in our town. And then I graduated and went on my way, but had always stayed back in touch with Shane. And then when he started to give me options to write, I had written for him just for some Gen Con adventures. I would go to Gen Con and help out, do things like that. But I think the first book that he offered me, where I had talked him into letting me write, was I wrote a third of Waste Warriors, and then I wrote Denver, I think, came first, and then City of Sin for Hell on Earth. So those were really fun. So yeah, so we basically we played GURPS first, and then we transitioned over to Torg. We actually jumped from our world, where a High Lord was trying to get in on the invasion of Earth with Torg, and we transitioned into Core Earth there. I actually took Shane to his first convention in Baltimore, which was Origins, where he met the West End Games guys, and then it's all history from there. So.
How cool is that, though? That this has been a lifelong hobby turned, job turned passion, and yet you still get so much from it in terms of, the socializing and getting to be closer with your friends and stuff like that. And I think, you two and Shane, obviously, and a few others are really shining examples for a lot of the people in the comments right now that say, yes, like that's what I love. That's kind of the best path I want to take. Right now I'm playing around the table with my friends, and I want to do that. And we've interviewed people on this show and others as well. And how many of them were, how many of them were, they're like, oh, this is my buddy, and we're writing this together, and this is kind of the path we want to take. And it's really nice to see, you old people, and I really want to stretch out the no, but it's really nice to see that this friendship has lasted throughout the ages, and I know, and I speak on behalf of the audience, to get to see people still making really cool shit that they care about.
It's aspirational, I think.
It is,
to be able to find a crew of people that love the game as much as you do, and that you meld with so well that you're not only still talking to them to this day, but you're still gaming together.
And keep wanting to make it better and make more stuff. You know what I mean? We've also spoken to people who kind of had their one and done and just sit back and coast, and they're like, yeah, but both of you are still so like interested in moving the ball forward and making new things. And Maybe not John. I know you're kind of on the outs anyway. Yeah.
You just make me laugh because you're like moving the ball forward and stuff. Yet the thing that I'm most known for is the first thing that I write.
Well, yeah, but you're still writing. You haven't given. What I mean to say is you're not like, oh, here's another edition of the first thing I
And
wrote.
Dark Ages sounds like it's going to be a real hit. So.
It fucking better be.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be. We get one swear word, I think, on this show, so I used
You
it
just,
well.
damn it, Harlan.
Whatever.
Start
I did that.
I was sleeping up.
Start brushing up on your ancient British geography, though. 'Cause when,
You heard it here
gotta
first,
go
folks.
from blah 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 to blah blah blah. You're like, is that?
Go find the
north,
illustrated
south?
manuscripts of Ye Old Britain.
I'm going
It's
to make
true.
the Reddit for it right now and be the moderator and just block anybody that
Viciously.
Wrong. Yeah, well, this has been an absolute blast getting to talk to you and learn a little bit about, where you are and why you're here and all that kind of awesome stuff. We love to end every little interview with a question. We've been asking everybody from this show in the last, basically, what are you enjoying? It's rare that we just get to sort of drop the veil and talk about all the stuff that we consume, whether it be a great book, whether it be a song that's just stuck in your head, a show you just finished, a movie that totally just made you drop your jaw, or just some other random YouTube hole thing.
Your favorite sandwich.
Share, your favorite sandwich. Who cares? Share with us, with the audience, just something you're really enjoying right now. Teller, what's something you're just digging? You want more people to check out?
Well, unfortunately, my gaming group that's down around my area, not John's role-playing group, but the other gaming group that I have in the area, we've recently got into Necromunda, and unfortunately, when I get into games like that, I go all out and I spend money like a drunken sailor. So I've been putting some gangs together, terrain, painting them up, and gaming every week with that. So been having a lot of fun. I never played it when it first came around back in the 90s, I guess, but I really enjoy that, so it's been fun.
So that's your big sort of passion right now. That's the thing that you're kind of excited about. That's awesome.
Well, like John, I enjoy painting figures, modeling terrain, and so that's giving me an outlet right now because my main gaming group has moved to Roll20, so now I don't have to paint figures or model terrain or anything. So.
When you do paint and do terrain, are you listening to music? Are you silent? Do you watch tutorials? Do you just kind of go by the seat of your pants?
So usually I'll just have something on in the background on the TV. So,
Star Trek.
yeah, there you go.
Perfect. That's awesome. John, what about you? What are you enjoying? Can be anything.
Well, I can bring things full circle with you mentioned Carl Kessler and his terrain, or actually the comments mentioned Carl Kessler and his terrain. And I, back during the pandemic, got into 3D printing. And, I spend a ton of time printing and painting terrain, mostly, also miniatures, but I find that terrain actually kind of stimulates my mind as to what I can do with this particular piece, or I'm going to print this piece. Now that I've printed it and I look at it, I'm going to change something that I've written to match that. And I had to disappoint Teller earlier, speaking of Necromunda, by telling him I can't print that terrain for you. It's just too involved. Every now and then I throw him a bone and print something out, but this one I had to say that might be more than I could do. But I find that 3D printing is a new creative area to explore, not only with the terrain and the painting, but just making stuff that I can use around the house.
Yeah.
And just to answer any follow-up question, I generally have YouTube on while I paint and I drink. I think that's indicative of a problem.
We're not judging.
And funnily enough, you're not the first person on this show to mention 3D printing. A lot of people, especially, in this hobby, have been really enthusiastic about it being the kind of one of the best times to start. They're cheaper now, but also it's just so cool to get to be able to punch something in and wake up the next morning and have this thing that you did.
When I walk into a game store now, I look at, and game store owners everywhere are going to hate this. I look at the miniatures and, more importantly, the terrain that's being sold. And I'm like, I can print that out for like $5 in materials, and they want $75 for it. So
I can do that. So you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Hit up John Goff for all your terrain needs. It's cheaper than $75, apparently.
It's only $5. That's all you have to pay him.
It's only $5. That's what we've heard here. 30% of that goes to me. Shane did let us know the comment that he had. Here is what Shane said when he came on. He said that these two guys taught me how to game, that they were my gaming mentors, and I love them. And he said sorry that he was driving home from jury duty and got stuck in traffic. So there you go. There's the message from Shane.
Yes,
he loves you. I know he wanted me to say it, so I'll just say it. I love both of you, but I'm a surrogate through Shane because.
So one last story, because I'll bet Shane would have told this about me. So we used to play the Judge Dredd role-playing game from Games Workshop, I guess, because I found a lover of Judge Dredd and Shane, and the two of us just bonded over because back in the 90s nobody knew it was the Eagle Comics version of Judge Dredd, right? Not the real Judge Dredd's never made it over here to the US. So we had gone through some adventures, and the next month our National Guard unit was doing riot control training, and I was leading the rioters, and Shane was on the wall with the riot shields and the face helmets and all that stuff. And I was leading them in a chant, and we were throwing bottles at them and all this stuff. And Shane afterwards was like, man, it was just like that Judge Dredd thing that we did the other week. He always talks about that. And I was like, I did a really good Mega City Juve, I guess.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight and getting to answer some of the questions from ourselves and the audience. I know it's really great to get on camera with you. I don't know if you do socials or anything like that, but Teller, if there's anywhere people can follow you or do anything like that, let us know now. No, that's it. No. This is it. Teller's done. John Goff, is there anywhere people can follow you or interact with you in any way?
Due to the nature of the work that I do outside of the writing, have really reduced my social media profile down to just Facebook, and I kind of limit that to people I actually know.
Perfect.
But,
so
hey, you're welcome to follow me on Facebook. I do post stuff occasionally.
There you go. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. Like I said, this has been an absolute blast. My name is always Mr. Helen Guthrie. Again, you can follow me on @TheLearyValley on Twitter, or my show @MalevolentCast. I make a Lovecraftian horror audio drama called Malevolent. If you like horror or you like audio dramas, check it out. It is part of the Rusty Quill Network, and I'm pretty proud of it. And my lovely wife.
I am Jo Guthrie. I am the host and DM of the Actual Play podcast Dice Shame. Please go and download it wherever you get your podcasts, and feel free to check me out on Twitter.
Or else. And we should also mention that Joe and myself on November 5th will be streaming for 24 hours for Extra Life charity. We've been doing it for the past 6 years. We've raised cumulatively over $20,000 now. It all goes directly to sick kids' hospitals. We're going to be doing that November 5th on our YouTube channel, The Invictus Stream.
Come hang out.
If you're doing nothing that day, come hang out. We're going to be playing a ton of video games, maybe a few RPGs, and probably eating some spicy chicken wings. But that is it from us. Thank you again so much for Teller and John for joining us tonight. Thank you to Chris for organizing everything behind the scene. Thank you for Shane for stopping by and saying some nice things. We'll be back next week. Have a wonderful evening and enjoy the rest of your week. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.